Salutations, everyone, and thank you for watching this special edition of DiabeticRadio.com. This video is dedicated to all the non-diabetics. In this video, I'll be discussing basically diabetes etiquette and some of the things that you need to know about diabetes. So let's get started. Number one. I think that this is the first thing on the top of a diabetic's list. One thing that I've learned growing up as a kid is that you never give advice unless it's asked of you. Only give information when it's asked. There's nothing worse than having a bunch of people giving you all kinds of advice, on unsolicited advice on things, coming from people who are not healthcare professionals. And I know that you are probably a good friend and you want to show people your love and support, and this is your way of helping them, but it's not really. Because if you continue doing that, at the end of the day, that diabetic will do everything in their power to avoid you, because they just, after a while, they just don't want to hear it anymore. And I think that it's important to ask for your input rather to shove your health views down a diabetic's throat. If you want to keep your diabetic friends, then I suggest that you don't consistently say that, especially in public. No one food will affect all diabetics in the same way. We know what we can eat and what we can't eat. We know where our numbers should be that's been set forth by our doctors. So, we know when to take our insulins. We know when not to. We know how to compromise. And really, that's not in your place. I'm being quite frank with you. And this whole idea of, okay, you're diabetic, so you have a carrot while I eat this roast beef steak. No. The same healthy foods that a diabetic can eat, everybody else can eat as well. Again, having a steak every now and then isn't going to kill you. Having macaroni and cheese, ice cream, it's not going to kill you. The point is the portion. It's very important to have portion control, because although food is not the cause of diabetes, but it is the way that we manage our diabetes. So I think that's an important thing to really remember. I also think that a perfect key is not to assume that just because someone is a diabetic, they don't know how to take care of themselves. When we say that we need to take our insulin to, in essence, keep us healthy and to stay alive, that's not a figure of speech. That's real. And we have to take our insulin before meals, before snacks, and even when we're not eating. The body always needs insulin. Now, having said that, if you are offended by needles, then really it's not our problem. We're not mutants. We're not people that should be ashamed of being in public and being diabetic. in public. We shouldn't have to run to the bathroom all the time, as though we are some kind of creature that needs to be away from the public. Really, if you have problems with watching people injecting themselves with life-saving insulin, if you have a problem with needles, really the problem is with you. You should turn your head the other way. And if it still bothers you, then maybe you really wasn't that much of a friend. Sorry to say. A lot of foods that are so-called made, quote unquote, for diabetics. Um, a lot of those, I know for me personally, I can't eat. Like for instance, the sugar substitutes. So many of them have gave me so much stomach issues, and after a while, I realized I had to abandon them because I was getting too sick. So you know what? I feel perfectly fine eating regular table sugar and just giving myself a unit of insulin extra, to avoid getting sick. Just trying to be, quote unquote, that good diabetic. Real life, sometimes we have to make those decisions. And not everything that is made for diabetic is good and healthy for the rest of us. Yes, you could. Yes, you could. Yes, you can. Because once you realize what's at stake and that your life is literally in danger and that your quality of life would be taken away if you don't take immediate action with your diabetes, yeah, you would live that life. Yes, even if it means taking insulin. You talk that stuff now, but truth of the matter is um, that survival kicks in and you'll do it. Point blank, you'll do it. I think this is a very, very important point. We all diabetics really do need to be respected. Um, it's cool that you want to share your opinions about health and things like that. But it's one thing to have a discussion about diabetes and another to shove your views down our throats. And I think that the bottom line, again, you have to realize that it's our lives. And just because we have diabetes, it doesn't mean that you have the right to assume that we got diabetes because we're not taking care of ourselves. Um, Diabetes is hard enough, really. This is so important. While I believe that I believe that diabetes is nothing that anyone should be ashamed of. Yet diabetes is still very much a private disease in terms of how you manage your diabetes. And if I tell you that I'm diabetic, or if anybody tells you that they're diabetic, they're sharing a little piece of themselves. Having said that, it doesn't mean that you have the right to take that and share it with somebody else and talk to someone else about your diabetes as though I'm some kind of invalid. You know, we're not invalids. It, we're just like everybody else. It just the only difference is that we have to live our lives differently from the average person. Ask all the questions you need to know rather than pointing a finger or making statements that you may or may not know. And I think that doing that will also cause stronger bonds between you and the diabetic. You know, you can't really learn much if you're always talking. I know you may think that sharing horror stories of your um, diabetic family's bad experiences is helpful. They're not. But what I do know is that many times what it really is about that other person. That other person really telling you that when they say that their grandmother gotten her leg amputated, or their father went blind or something like that. Really, they're telling you that they're scared of having diabetes, but it's not productive for anyone to focus on those things. And I think that it's equally important to recognize that those things that you saw, you're relating to to your diabetes experience, but that's not what diabetes is. You have to understand that those horrible things that may have happened in your family's life was really because of uncontrolled blood sugars. For whatever reason, that family member was unsuccessful in controlling their blood sugars for whatever reason. It may not be because they just chose not to take care of themselves. It just could mean that their body just didn't want to cooperate. And I mean, that's unfortunate, but I think that, if you are aware that you do this, I think you need to change that and start talking more about positive things. And those positive things can be ways that you and your diabetic friend could think about becoming more healthier for the both of you, and just don't make it a thing about your friend being the diabetic. I think it's very important for you to understand it's not a good idea to peek at anybody's numbers without permission. Because, like I said before, your blood sugars fluctuate and minute by minute, and there's a myriad of reasons why your blood sugar can shoot up or shoot downward. Sometimes it could be stress, sometimes it could be um, a whole bunch of things, whether you're eating food or not. So if you go and you look at that diabetics number and you already start passing judgments before that person has gotten a chance to correct that sugar, is not productive. I don't recommend that. That would be another way of breaking that relationship between you and that diabetic friend. Practice what you preach is a good one. I've seen nurses who would just get on top of some diabetic patients and tell them how they need to take care of themselves, and really badger them, and you need to do this and you need to do that. And the next thing you know, these individuals, these nurses, go down on a break, and they're smoking 2 packs of cancer sticks. Hello. Practice what you preach. What I mean by being a good nurse or a good healthcare professional is that to make sure that your information is updated. There's a lot of nurses, a lot of CDEs that I came across that have that same knowledge from way back in the 1970s. We are now in 2011. There's a whole lot since diabetes has changed a whole lot since you went to school and learned about diabetes. It's very important that you need to do this. It is embarrassing, I'm sorry to say, for someone, a nurse or a CDE in this day and age, who can't even identify a insulin pump, who mistakes an insulin pump for a beeper. That's unacceptable. And you know what, on a personal note, In this day and age, with the economy being the way that it is, you owe it to yourself. If not to your patients, you owe it to yourself to constantly being updated so that you can not only help your patients better, but if God forbid you lose your job, you won't be on the unemployment now and trying to find a job with 40-year-old information. That's very important because no employer wants to waste any money retraining a nurse that should know these things. Something to think about. Yes, it's true. Diabetes does not discriminate. Whether you're white, whether you're black, whether you're Asian, whether you're Hispanic, whether you're gay, whether you're straight, it doesn't care. Diabetes is an equal opportunity destroyer. And we all need to put our heads together, regardless of our differences, and help each other save our lives and give each other support so that we can, if we can't beat the disease, if we don't have a cure, at least we can do our damnedest to manage it. And we need to start supporting each other and not separating each other. You know, just because someone is overweight, it doesn't mean that they can't have type 1 diabetes. You know, insulin is a fat storing hormone, so why is it impossible for someone to think that a type 1 person can't be fat? And the other thing, just because someone has a thin body, it doesn't necessarily mean that that person is healthier than a larger framed body simply because they're thinner. Now you should know that, but yet for some reason the majority of our society has this mentality. You know, 50 years ago there was no type 1, type 2 gestational, there was none of that. There was only one type of diabetes. And because now we're learning more about diabetes, and we had to create subcategories within diabetes to describe the different situations of diabetes. These now have become labels used to judge people. And even within these labels, there are misconceptions and misunderstandings, and labels are not good at all. And I guess the only way to really combat labels is for both non-diabetics and non-diabetics to start reading and talking to each other, and let us learn from each other so that we don't make these same kinds of mistakes. There are many, many, many reasons why someone is diabetic. Believe it or not, some people, they think that diabetes is caused by being overweight and eating too much, but there's no real study. Even though there's been a lot of media on this, there's no real clean-cut study that specifically indicates weight gain a cause for diabetes. Being overweight, unfortunately, can make taking care of your diabetes harder. There's no question about that. There's no argument. But to say that you're diabetic because you're heavy set is untrue. A lot of this has to do with genetics, and sometimes your environment is like the trigger. No one really knows how or why it starts. But unfortunately, you need to be aware that many companies use weight. They try to sell you the idea of weight gain and diabetes in order to sell their product. Now, having said this, it doesn't mean that you should not take care of yourself and eat healthy, but it does put things into a different perspective when you know this piece of important information. The other thing is that people become diabetic sometimes because it's been drug induced. Sometimes it's many years of stress. Sometimes it's through illness, or even surgery. We don't think about someone who has pancreatic cancer and who's had to have an operation to remove a good portion of their pancreas. What the hell do you think that happens then? Well, they lose a large part of their ability to make insulin. Well, what do you think that means? It means that they're going to have to be on shots, and they would have to live their life as a type 1 diabetic, even though technically, genetically, they're not. I love this one. I really do. And the scary part is, though, I can't believe how many nurses that say the same thing. Let me give you a clue. Type 1 is a autoimmune disease, which means that you have antibodies that literally destroy your pancreas cells that are responsible for making insulin. So if they destroy them, totally gone, like having burnt skin, that means they can't grow back. That means that if you're diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 4, you'll still have it at the age of 40. Why the hell are nurses telling patients that you're too old? Just because you have insurance doesn't mean that you're actually able to afford your medical supplies. So I think this is another myth that is not really addressed. And I think that more importantly, doctors need to be aware of this, because sometimes, they'll yell at the patient for not taking their medications. And, lots of times they don't ask whether or not it's a matter of finances. They always come after the patient as though they're not taking care of their medications on purpose, because they just, choose on purpose to be non-compliant. I think if you consistently tell people that they're diabetic all the time, it puts the diabetes ahead of the person. And like I said before, diabetics are no different from anybody else. We can do the same things like everybody else, and there's no reason why we should be treated really any different. Rather than pointing a finger, I think a more productive way of helping your friend with diabetes would be to ask them to join you in a walk. Maybe you want to do some shopping, maybe you want to walk in a park, whatever it is. And let me tell you something, especially when you're carrying heavy bags, that helps you to use a lot of glucose. So not only will you have a healthy day of exercise and movement, it can also be a day to help bond your friendships a lot closer. This is an issue that's very important to me, and I think it should be yours too, because um, diabetics are being diagnosed younger and younger and younger by the minute. It's unbelievable how many kids are being diagnosed with diabetes now. And I really think that parents should step up to the plate and really talk about this, um, particularly since so many young kids are more likely to do a whole lot of experimenting when they're young. And a perfect example of this is type 1s who take insulin, and, you know, just being mindful and making sure that you keep your syringes at a safe place. I mean, you don't know whether your friends are on drugs or not. They'll, steal one of your syringes and put it back in your bag, just so because they don't want you to find out that, they're on drugs or they needed a needle. You don't know what the hell is going on in some of these people's minds. And I think that's something that is important to discuss. There's also a very important issue that I think that many parents may or may not be aware of, and that is something called, I think it's diabetic bulimia, or insulin bulimia. Sometimes they call it insulin manipulation. And this is something very serious. What a lot of young kids are doing is eating food and on purpose not taking their insulin, causing their blood sugars to run unbelievably high. And like I said on my blog, this when this happens, it causes something called ketoacidosis, which is very, very dangerous, and it will wind you up in the hospital or you lose your life or both. This is something that's should not be played with. Why young kids do this? It's because when the body, when the cells are not getting the glucose in its system or its food, the glucose, it will find other resources because the body's self-sufficient. Its goal is to stay alive. So it will start breaking down the muscles and breaking down the fat to create energy. And in doing this, you lose weight. You don't want to do this because this will put you in the hospital. That's not the way to lose weight. That is a way of putting yourself in a very dangerous situation. And I think parents need to be aware of that. And I think children need to be aware of that. And I think teachers and school nurses need to be aware of this and recognize it when they see it. And also, while you're teaching your children about morals and respect, the importance of education and respect, the birds and the bees and respect. Oh, wait, did I mention respect? When you're teaching your child all of those things, I think it's important to also teach them healthy eating habits, because when these guys, when they come out of school, they're exposed to all these candies. And I'm not talking about just, one or two, candies. They are exposed to an abundance of candies. Kids share and they exchange candies. They're eating candies all day. And by the time, they're 30, they have all these complications, losing their teeth, gingivitis, losing their eyesight simply because diabetes wasn't dealt early on. And I suppose that for a lot of parents, it won't be dealt early on, because at some point it also means that the parent has to change some of their own lifestyles and their own eating habits. And a lot of parents are just not willing to give that up unless they're diabetic themselves. But think of it this way: it's not about you. It's saving your child's life. Instilling your child with the tools that he or she needs to take with him or her as an adult. You may not see it, but it takes a lot of discipline to live your life with diabetes. To test yourself 3-4 times a day, inject yourself 3-4 times a day, and this is emotionally and psychologically puts a wear and tear on the person. It's not easy, doing that all the time. And sometimes, we just have burnout. All of us have had it, And when you have burnout and you just say to yourself, oh, I'm not taking care of my diabetes. I don't want to give myself a shot. I don't want to, I don't want to have another needle on my body. And you pay for it later. You'll get sick, but once, you've gone through that, burnout stage, the important thing is that you get back on the bandwagon so that you can keep yourself healthy. What I find interesting is that when a nurse comes across a diabetic who happens to be well informed about their diabetes, sometimes when a patient goes through a unique situation, I've seen healthcare professionals not know how to handle it. Like if it's not in the book or the way they was taught, they don't know how to answer that person. So rather than saying they don't know, they'll turn it around and say, well, you're supposed to do this or you're supposed to do that. That's not what the book says. And they're not able to really help that diabetic. And that's at that moment in time I realized that this is why there's a huge difference between the relationship between your doctor or healthcare team and actually living your life as a diabetic. The books only give you the basic understanding of what diabetes is, but then there's a life of a diabetic. And I think it's really important that, again, that we as diabetics, we need to connect and find each other and give each other support and share each other's life experience. Because there's nothing more stronger, nothing more powerful than life experience. That this video has been helpful to you. And I really hope that this video has helped you see diabetes in a different light and shed a little light of what a diabetic goes through and just some of the things, many things that a diabetic goes through and how we see things through our eyes. So thanks for watching. Take care.